put in a position of job at Salesian High School to take advantage of housing. But it's apparent. No transparency. All decisions made before this committee, behind closed doors, and that's the reason why the FBI is here investigating money laundering, abuse of federal and state dollars, and all this fucking corruption that you created in Plum, Jose Huizar. Fuck you and your fat cunt wife for taking advantage of public interest in public meetings, in public commissions, because you took it to an advantage of your own interest, and that was to take advantage of public interest. So 42 U.S.C. 1983, fuck you.
All right, is there anyone else? Come on up. Come on up and let us know your name.
It's difficult to top, but my name is Greg Spiegel with the Inner City Law Center. We know that we have a homeless crisis that's caused in large part by a lack of housing affordable to low-income families. A contributing factor to this crisis are short-term rentals.
Hold on, Mr. Spiegel. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gil Cedillo of the 1st District. Grateful to you for joining us. We now, ladies and gentlemen, have quorum. The meeting is officially open.
Point of clarification before we reset the time on his clock. I just want to let everybody know that Mr. Cedillo is received that way every time he steps into these chambers, and I'm continuously perplexed.
We welcome him. And we're joined by our Vice Chair, Mr. Englander of the San Fernando Valley. Mr. Spiegel, you're on for 1 full minute. Let's reset his time.
Okay, Greg Spiegel with Inner City Law Center. We know that we have a homeless crisis that is caused in large part by a lack of housing affordable to low-income families. A contributing factor to this crisis are short-term rentals that have removed tens of thousands of units from our permanent housing stock. We applaud you for closing loopholes that have degraded our stock of permanent housing. But we ask that you not reopen a loophole by allowing rent-stabilized units to be used for short-term rentals. And certainly don't do so under the illusion that it would bring benefits to low-income tenants. Low-income tenants typically don't have spare rooms, and if they do, it would be better if they were used as rented for permanent housing for someone else, rather than from an out-of-towner looking for a cheap hotel. We're having a permanent housing crisis. Protecting housing should be our priority. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll suspend public comment on item number 5. Mr. Mejia, we will begin with our director's report, which I believe we will continue today, as there is no report by my report, and then we will go to item number 2.
Sure. Councilman, item number 2 is a motion, Corretz Huizar. It's instructing that the planning department initiate the process for a historic cultural monument for the property located at 3563 South Motor Avenue in CD5.
All right. There are no public speakers on this item, and there's been a request from CD5 to continue this matter, and so we'll continue this to a date to be determined. And we'll go to item number 4.
Sure. Item 4, Councilman, this is a report from the City Planning Department. It's a status update on the community plan program in various neighborhoods throughout the city.
Excellent. So I believe we have a short report from staff.
Yes, good afternoon. Councilman Blake Lamb with the Department of City Planning. I'm here today to provide to you a status update on the department's community planning update program. And also, in addition, Lisa Weber will be providing an update on the department's environmental consultant competitive selection process related to our environmental impact reports for private development projects. So first, let me very quickly provide you an update to the department's community planning update program. The department is well underway in its program to update all 35 community plans by the year 2024. Each region of the city has plan updates currently underway in various stages, from the initial outreach to the release of plans EIRs. In the Central East region, Most notably, the department has just released the Environmental Impact Report for the Hollywood Community Plan on November 15th, with the comment period extending to the end of January 2019. In total, there are 4 community plans in this region that are anticipated to be brought forward for adoption during the 2019 calendar year: Hollywood, Boyle Heights, Central City, and Central City North. The remaining community plans in this region will then be updated as those 4 plans are adopted. In the Valley region, the plan concepts for 3 community plans: Canoga Park, Winnetka, Woodland Hills, West Hills, Reseda, West Van Nuys, and the Encino, Tarzana community plans have been presented to the community in a series of workshops during the month of October and November. And in addition, initial outreach for the Southeast community plans, which include Van Nuys, North Sherman Oaks, North Hollywood Valley Village, and Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Toluca Lake, and Cahuenga Pass, has been completed. The remaining 8 community plans in the North Valley, so all 8 community plans in the North Valley, will also be updated as the plans in the South Valley are adopted in the year 2020 and 2021. In the South, West, and Harbor regions, the department has commenced updates and initial outreach for community plans in the West Side area, West Los Angeles, Palms Mar Vista, Del Rey, Venice, and Westchester Playa del Rey. The department has also begun updates and initial outreach to 2 plans in the Harbor region. These include Harbor Gateway and Wilmington Harbor City. The remaining 3 community plans in the West Side, which include Westwood, Bel Air, Beverly Crest, and Brentwood, Pacific Palisades, those will be updated as the previous community plans are updated, and those are targeted to be updated by the year 2024. The department's community plan program is fully staffed and well underway. And just to conclude, we confirm that all plans will be updated by the year 2024. And with that, I will hand this over to Lisa Weber to provide an update on the department's environmental impact consultant selection process. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Good afternoon, council members. So at the direction of the City Council, the department has conducted a process to vet and create a standard list of consultants for the preparation of CEQA-required environmental impact reports for private development projects. So prior to the release of the request for qualifications, the department sent out over 100 advertisements to over 100 professional associations and chambers of commerce, really just to get the word out. We also sent advertisements to organizations representing recognized categories under the city's business inclusion program, and this includes minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, small business enterprises, among several others. These advertisements not only informed organizations of the upcoming request for qualification process, but also provided links to information about how to register on the Los Angeles Business Assistance Virtual Network. In summer of 2017, the department released the request for qualifications and held a mandatory pre-bid conference to answer questions and to fully explain the scope of work. In response, the department received 33 statements of qualifications. In response, we did create several evaluation panels, and we have now completed our evaluation of these qualification packages. Contract awards and non-selection notifications for the consultant list are ready to go out and will be distributed in the upcoming weeks. In addition, I'd like to note that the department will be reopening this process in 18 months' time, and this will allow for both the non-selected consultants and any other consultants that did not submit on this round an opportunity to be added to the list. That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a couple public comment cards on this matter, Ms. Chanel Blake and Ms. Marnie Lustig. Pardon me if I got my gender pronouns wrong. All right, I was right.
Hi, my name is Chanel Blake. I have a fourplex in the community of Leimert Park in South LA. I've been privileged in the 20 years that I've had my building to house the homeless, veterans, people who are HIV positive, Section 8, people living on vouchers, the elderly, physically and mentally challenged.
Ms. Blake?
Yes.
So you signed up to speak on item number 4? which is about planning updates.
I'm so sorry. It was corrected later. I thought that you were
Okay, so
going
we'll put you down. We'll put you down for 5.
Okay.
Thank you. Same thing. So we'll put you down for 5 as well. All right. Lustig and Blake. All right. So, are there questions or comments from members? If not, we will receive and file this matter, and thank you all for your presentation. Item number 3, Mr. Mejia.
Yes, Councilman. Item 3 is a city attorney prepare ordinance which removes reference to Mills Act fees that were included in the admin code and cross-reference those fees to the municipal code.
I think we have a presentation by planning staff.
With the Planning Department. I'm joined by Oscar Mejia from the City Attorney's Office. This is just a report back from...
Please do not disrupt the meeting one more time and you're out. Pardon me. Continue.
This is just an update relative to the Mills Act Historical Property Contracts Ordinance to reflect the new fees that were adopted by Council earlier this year.
That's correct. Oscar Mejia, City Attorney's Office. We've presented this draft ordinance approved as to form and legality for your review.
All right. If there are no questions or comments from members, we'll approve the city attorney prepared ordinance and categorical exemption. This ordinance does not constitute a project under CEQA, and the ordinance makes technical corrections. That being the order, let's go to item number 5.
Item 5, Councilman. These are 2 city attorney prepared ordinance. One ordinance relates to home sharing, and the second one relates to the creation of a new short-term rental enforcement trust fund.
All right. We have a presentation from staff on this matter.
Yes, good afternoon, committee members. My name is Matt Kolesny from the Planning Department. I'll be walking you through our report back based on the plum instructions from November the 6th, as well as give a verbal report requested by the Housing Committee. But first, we want to just give a brief summary of the final ordinance that is in front of you today. We know we have some new members in the committee. By way of background, the ordinance before you is the proposed home sharing ordinance, which the committee has seen several times over the last 2 years. The goal of the ordinance is to balance the concerns regarding the loss of housing stock and impacts to residential character with the recognition that there are many positive opportunities for residents to share their homes with guests in a responsible manner. As such, the proposed ordinance legalizes a type of short-term rentals, which is less than 30 days at a time, in one's own primary residence, something we're calling home sharing. To verify that homes are not being taken off the long-term market, the ordinance creates a new web-based registration system, as well as a new regulatory system aimed at enhancing enforcement against hosts and platforms that operate outside of the legal framework. The final ordinance before you incorporates important amendments approved by the Plum and Housing Committees, including reinstating a prohibition on home sharing in units subject to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, or RSO, and allowing home sharing year-round through a separate, more involved process beyond the regular 120-day cap that we're calling extended home sharing. Extended home sharing requires neighbor notification and a review of verified citations for 3 years prior to issuance. Hosts or properties that have had past violations will be subject to a discretionary review by the department that is similar to a conditional use permit, whereby conditions can be opposed and potentially disruptive applications can be denied if the director finds there to be likelihood of an adverse impact or nuisance behavior into the future. We know how important enforcement is to this ordinance. Today, the typical complaint-based enforcement has not proven easy, largely because of the nature of short-term rentals. The ordinance is designed to dramatically increase effectiveness by creating more enforcement tools and more tailored regulations to address these issues. The basic enforcement approach is based on prohibiting advertising without a city registration number. There are also a number of prohibitions and responsibilities for both hosts and platforms aimed at protecting quality of life in neighborhoods and ensuring accountability. The committee has also requested additional enhancements of enforcement, such as a 24/7 hotline that could offer real-time outreach to hosts and resolve issues, as well as a task force between city agencies for enforcement. At the November 6th meeting, Plum Committee requested planning to report back on details on what it's called the web-based enforcement system and anticipated implementation timelines. Our November 28th report provides details which we'll briefly summarize. First, it's critical to note that the efficacy of home sharing ordinance depends on the assistance of a proactive, technology-based approach to enforcement. This is because the activity is largely online, where information on site location and host name are hidden from public view, and enforcement therefore depends on a systematic monitoring of listings. Therefore, we believe that effective enforcement depends on harvesting information from public web listings, including property location and verification of correct registration numbers. In line with City Council direction, this department has been working closely with the Office of City Attorney to move forward options for securing a third-party vendor that can provide these services. The department has developed a proposed scope of services, which is provided as an attachment to the departmental report for short-term rental compliance services. Assuming these contractual services are employed, additional staff needed across the city departments can consist of a core unit to facilitate registration and enforcement among city departments and the vendor, as well as another larger group to handle the administrative and discretionary actions. This ordinance cannot be implemented without appropriate staffing and ordinance and resources in place, the details of which are again outlined in our report. Additionally, there are several key milestones that need to be completed before the effective date of the ordinance, which is July 1st, including executing an agreement with a third-party vendor for IT services, creating the registration systems, and establishing enforcement protocols within city agencies. These steps are also outlined in our report. To assist in the preparation necessary for effective implementation and enforcement of the proposed ordinance, the department has provided several recommended actions to the City Council related to securing contractual services and onboarding new staff. Secondly, at the prior meeting on November 6th, the Plum Committee additionally requested planning engaged platforms, hosting platforms, to identify additional options to incentivize maximum participation and compliance by platforms, including incentives that could be incorporated within what the ordinance calls platform agreements. The platform agreement framework, as introduced by the Plum Committee and currently incorporated in the draft ordinance, provides incentives, including waiving certain requirements for hosts who advertise solely on platforms that have entered into platform agreements with the city and comply with the platform responsibilities, as well as collect and remit TOT, or transient occupancy tax. Platform agreements are intended to provide specific details on how the platforms will comply with the platform requirements in the ordinance, not whether they will comply. The platform agreement incentives provided in the draft ordinance focus primarily on providing streamlining benefits for hosts who register exclusively on those platforms. Based on conversations with hosting platforms, the department has provided 2 additional policy options that work within the scope of the proposed home sharing framework to further incentivize platform participation and compliance. These include, first, allowing hosts to renew the home sharing registration every 2 years rather than annually, and secondly, allowing additional flexibility with platform data sharing requirements while ensuring the city's enforcement needs are addressed. Finally, at the November 14th, 2018 meeting of the Housing Committee, the Housing Committee requested planning work with the Department of Housing Community Investment, or HCID, to look at the issues of options for owner-occupied small multifamily units to be exempted from the RSO prohibition. Planning staff worked with RSO staff at the Housing Department on this report. At this time, HCID does not have data available on the exact number of RSO units that are owner-occupied, but census data shows that there are about 10,000 2 to 4 unit buildings that are believed to be owner-occupied. However, this does not tell us how many of those are subject to the RSO. One option is to study a limited RSO exemption for owner-occupied units in less than 4 unit buildings as part of a future report. If council wishes to incorporate this limited exemption in the current ordinance, council members should know that there is uncertainty regarding how an exemption or carve-out to the current ordinance would affect the environmental analysis under CEQA. Further review would likely be needed under CEQA, and the environmental document would likely need to be revised and recirculated. That concludes our report summary. With that, we're happy to any questions you have. I believe the City Attorney's Office here is to walk
Yes,
through the report.
we would love to hear from the City Attorney in this regard.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers. I just have a few recommended technical and clerical corrections to the ordinance that the City Attorney transmitted last week, and if I may briefly run through those. With regard to the definition of citation, we recommend removing the words after code on the last line of the definition. With regard to the definition of platform agreement, we recommend removing the word the words rentals at the end of the definition. Remove the words after the word rentals at the end of the definition. With regard to subparagraph C2, two little i's A in the registration section, we recommend removing the third full sentence. With regard to subparagraph D6 in the prohibition section, we recommend removing the word or after the word residence. With regard to subparagraph E6 in the host requirements section, we recommend adding a space between the words in and the word compliance. With regard to subparagraph H1 little I in the extended home sharing section, we recommend adding the word ministerial before the word approval. With regard to subparagraph H1 two little i's, this should refer to subparagraph H, not subparagraph F as in the transmitted version. And with regard to subparagraph H1 two little i's B1, remove it as redundant and renumber subparagraphs H1 two little i's B2 and 3 to 1 and 2. And finally, add the word or to subparagraph H2 between the words suspension and the word as.
All right, we got all the typos.
Yes, they are. Clerical corrections.
Thank you. Any other comments from staff? Discussion, members? Englander? Questions, Mr. Englander?
Thank you very much. And yes, if it's Amy, then those are clarifications and not typos. Just walk me through some of the, not so much the language per se, but in the practical application of the language as it relates to the suspensions and citations, in that there are two different sections. One being that whatever is under the 120-day provision, if they receive a number of orders to comply or citations or violations, it's a different number than if they were going through an extended period beyond the 120. And why the difference? Why not have both sections the same? And so sort of walk me through how this would work in application on both sides of those, and then why the difference? Just in getting your thoughts.
Sure. I think the quick version, because there are a number of suspensions and revocations, but I think the quick answer, the difference between the extended stay, folks going beyond 120 days, and what we're calling regular home sharing below 120 days, is that the extended, the 120 days, have a provision where one verified citation, that's a violation of, that's an order to comply from building and safety, housing department, LAPD, party house. One verified citation for those folks would kick them out of the extended home sharing and put them back into the less than 120 day per year for the rest of that year.
Let's take a pause for that for 1 sec, so we can just have a discussion, and then we can continue that. So under that scenario, if the citation violation or order were not relative to or relevant to the home sharing per se, but some other, as an A citation, for example, for a barking dog or hedges overgrown, something that may not be at all related to the home sharing, not something structural, for example, from building and safety where there were modifications and not permits pulled, and or fire and life health related cause, but something that was completely out of the scope of or relative to home sharing. What happens in that? And they've had one. What happens there?
Yes. So the definition of citation is broad and does include any citation, enforcement order, ticket, or similar notice at the property issued by the enforcement agency. So yes, there's not a distinction, and so they would be subject to losing their extended stay and going back to down below.
Okay, if they wanted to appeal that decision and show that it was not relative or related to home sharing whatsoever, it was neighbor v. neighbor or whatever that might be, is there a process for that under that?
Right, Matt Gillespie Planning. So the way that is envisioned in the ordinance is they would have a cooling off, what we're just calling informally. You can go back to the bottom. There would not be, correct me, is there, I believe if there is an appeal process available when the citation was ordered by Building and Safety or Housing, they would have every right to appeal that order directly with the enforcement agency, but there's not a way to then take and appeal it with planning and say, I want to retain my extended home sharing. What they would be able to do, so there'd be a cooling off for the remainder of that year. They'd go back to below 120 days. At the end of the year, they would then be able to come back and reapply for the full extended home sharing, and they would be subject to a discretionary review process by the planning department where we would look at all the factors that were involved with that citation and could make a informed decision whether they should be allowed to go back and have the full-time.
And then when you say the rest of that year, do you mean filling out the rest of that calendar year, or is it 365 days from the date of something?
I believe it's the remainder of their registration period, the one-year registration period. So
they could, some people could get caught up in literally for 2 weeks, and some people could be 11 months.
That's correct.
Depending on what was left of the registration period.
Primary residence.
Correct.
Okay. So I'll take pause with that, but we can come back to that. I won't. Actually, maybe we can if we can have a dialogue on that piece of it for a moment. Let me ask my colleagues their opinion as it pertains to just specifically that. I would be more comfortable, and I don't know that there's an easy way. Well, I guess we're sitting on this side of the table, so we don't have to figure out the easy way to apply it. But I would feel more comfortable if it were, instead of just the one violation, particularly since it may not be, and there's a good chance it's not about the actual home sharing, that it were 2 instead of 1, and that the penalty then on the backside were longer, instead of being the remainder period of, it would be time certain. So you cannot exceed the 120 days. You're suspended for 1 year from the time of that violation. The date of that violation or the ordinance or notice to correct or comply, it's 1 year period from that date rather than the remaining period that's left on your clock when you happen to register. Because again, it could be a week, and now we're dealing with the same issue 2 weeks later. So, and rather than just one violation, my guess is that the supermajority of these kinds of violations are simply going to be because a neighbor doesn't want their next door neighbor having this type of property next to them, and that's understandable, except for there's no possible way to even count how many minor violations can trigger one of these kinds of notices. Again, your hedges are too big, your wall's 6 inches higher than it's supposed to be, you've got a barking dog, whatever that might be. If a neighbor wants to shut you down, it makes it relatively easy. And so I think the middle ground would be 2 of those violations, but then it's not just, again, not extending the time period to whatever's left on your platform. It's tied to that property for 1 full year, not to exceed the 120. Does that sound reasonable?
Mr. Cedillo.
Mr. Englander, I think what you're looking for is that the first concern I hear you raising seems to be one of nexus. That in fact that there should be a violation that's not a garden variety violation, but that independent of that, we're talking about a participation in the program, and therefore the objection should be tied to the program. The breaches and the violations should be tied to the program and what the program is designed for. So run-of-the-mill garden variety concerns about your neighbors aren't really relevant with respect to this. And so I think the first question is it should be designed with respect to nexus. Then the second question is that then the violation, is the remedy for the violation, is it a fair and just one? Do we have a one strike here, or do we have, new program, and how do we, as good neighbors, all get along? And is that the question that we want both our city attorney and our staff to address?
No, I appreciate that's exactly where I was going, except trying to find the path of least resistance, because I think the complexity here, Mr. Cedillo, is exactly that. Trying to figure out what kind of citation was it or was it not directly related to the type of activity as it relates to home sharing is almost impossible. And with some things, yes, very clear. But with many of the types of violations we may be talking about, maybe that they constructed an extra room, but that room was never being rented or shared out, and they did it so, and it wasn't in compliance, and in fact, they did so, before they were doing home sharing. There could be so many different scenarios. It just goes into a whole nother avenue of interpretation that's almost impossible. And then I'm trying to take exactly what you're suggesting and simplifying it. And perhaps the city attorney, if you can weigh in on this, Ms. Brothers.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, I think Councilmember Cedillo, you're right. I think this was envisioned as sort of a strict liability. If you have a citation that relates to activities or conditions at the property, regardless of what they are, that will be enough to sustain a suspension or a revocation. If you wanted to do something else, then that would be a different setup. It wouldn't be set up like this.
But I guess what I'm asking you is Mr. Cedillo was suggesting that what I was asking, which is he was spot on, is that the violation or the notice to comply or the correction, whatever that might be, it was directly related to the activity of home sharing, period. And if we can have the penalty as such reflect that, whether it's a revocation and or a suspension, and what I was saying is that might not be the case. I think it's probably too difficult to interpret that there was in most cases, not in all cases, some will be very easy, but probably in most of these would be very difficult. There's no list that we can generate to say, in other words, if you receive this type of violation, then it was obviously directly connected to home sharing. That it just wouldn't be that easy. That's what I'm looking for in some direction.
Okay, if I can back up a minute, there was also direction from some of the council members from the last May meeting that there be a suspension for party house violations, and that was a specific motion. So we tried to build that in, and so the ordinance distinguishes between sort of a one-time violation, like a party house, and it's anticipated there'd be a 30-day suspension, versus others that may go to the health and safety of the building. For example, you have wires sticking out in the exact room that you want to rent. That may not be directly related to home sharing, but it would certainly be a public health and safety issue, and so it's anticipated that the suspension would continue at least as long as that order to comply or HSID order is open and hasn't been remedied. So we did have those, but you're right, this is anticipated to be, you're going to have a suspension regardless of what the exact ticket is.
And I guess, and that's why my suggestion, colleagues, again, was going back to, it would be difficult to describe every type of violation and try to create the connection directly to the operation of home sharing. And to simplify, right? And
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, if I can. So that's true. I mean, we are anticipating that we'll be able to use the ACE citation system for the home sharing ordinance violations. So we may be able to glean from the types of citations we're seeing from ACE regarding a particular property. But beyond that, you're right, there may be things that, for example, like I said, the electric wire sticking out, well, that's not exactly home sharing, but it could impact the way you home share.
Yeah, so that's why it would be, and that's something that would obviously be very simple to comply with and fix, but once you've been written up for that compliance issue, you're out of the option to go beyond the extension, the way that this is being drafted, correct?
Arthi Varma, City Planning. Just to clarify, you would no longer be eligible for the administrative clearance, the ministerial approval process, but you would be eligible to apply under the discretionary process to go above the 120 days.
That's okay. So to go, but even if you have, that's what we were talking about offline prior to the meeting as well. I just wanted to make sure on the record there's clarification. So there's still a process then to go through even under one violation, one substantiated violation, that you could still then, you couldn't get it at the counter per se to go through the expedited process to go beyond the 120 days, but you could then go through a discretionary process to go beyond the 120 even if you had a violation or an order.
Arthi Varma, Department of City Planning, that's correct. And the Director of Planning has the authority to approve the extended home sharing permit under certain findings, one of which includes that there's no substantial evidence of ongoing nuisance violations.
Okay, great. Okay, that clarifies it then. And that's not really spelled out so much in the ordinance as much as probably the process, but okay, thank you.
Mr. Cedillo.
So I obviously support this, and I think that's there's great reason for this ordinance. There's some concerns I just want to make sure and share with you. So one obviously was making sure that the violations, and it appeared that that was the intent, that you said a strict liability, that a violation then would strike people from the program, but that you indicated that there should be a nexus between the violation.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, the
I'm sorry,
definition
Amy
of
Brothers,
citation itself actually references ordinance violations that are related to conditions at the property or activities at the property. So that's as close to nexus that this gets. I don't know that nexus was necessarily my word, but
So I know myself and several of my colleagues are concerned that there would be an abuse, that somebody doesn't like the program and therefore wants to undermine it by saying, their color of the paint, it's in a HPOZ and it's the wrong color of sage and therefore they can't do that, or it's in some other ICO and therefore they changed their back window and they did it differently than the city allows, and therefore they're precluded from this. And so we're searching for ways to get a comfort that those types of abuses are addressed and we are conscious of those.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, this is not directly an answer to your question, but the way this is set up, there will not be an effective suspension or revocation unless a person who's cited goes through the appeals process. So a person can appeal a citation he feels is not grounded in fact or law through the existing process. And if he does that, the suspension or the revocation will not become effective until that appeal has been exhausted.
Right. We appreciate that. We don't have an issue with that. It's just a question of the standard of review and what are those violations. We have very strict standards for people who make adjustments to their homes here in the city of Los Angeles. And so if you want to put a ramp in the back for your returning or father or mother, or if you want to change the back windows, you've got to get permission from your neighbors. If they don't approve, we're not quite sure if that's going to be the reason for you being prohibited from being able to utilize this program. And so that's what we're concerned about. Not the fact that there's a process. We appreciate the process. We just want to make sure that the standard of review is a fair standard and that it's related to the program, not to other factors. So I understand an empty wire, but I also think that we'd be sensitive to questions about they shouldn't have put the ramp, or they, changed the back windows, and it's inconsistent with our cottage Spanish style over here, and I don't want to name a community in the city of Los Angeles. So that's one. Second, so I understand the cost for the extended home sharing administrative clearance review. That is a cost that somebody's determined that's what the cost is. But it just seems that the second cost, the extended home sharing discretionary review, I'm just wondering if that doesn't become cost prohibitive. In other words, you're doing it in a way so that then what's the whole point? Many of these people who need to go beyond 120 days, if they had the extra, what is that, $6,400 or whatever the case may be, wouldn't need to afford themselves to the program. And so we want to make sure that it's not, or it seems to me that a concern would be that we're not making it to the whole point that it undermines the program. I understand that there are people who shouldn't be involved in the program and they should be excluded. But on the other hand, if those who want to extend and need to extend, that cost may be cost prohibitive. And so what's the whole point?
Just a quick question, Mr. Steele. I don't know, how much is, we didn't get into that. How much is the cost? Is there a cost to actually go through and get a discretionary?
It says here $56,660, and I don't know if that includes or excludes the $850. But it seems hefty if you're having to rent out a room at your house.
Arthi Varma, Department of City Planning. For the discretionary permit, it's $5,660.
Oh.
Councilman Mercedes suggested. That is
pocket change.
The process.
I didn't suggest it. Don't say I suggested it.
That's written in
the
draft ordinance.
Yes, I noted it.
That cost is the amount it's a full cost recovery, intended to be a full cost recovery fee to cover the staff time to process the entitlement, similar to many other conditional use permits
Got it.
that we have in the city.
Okay, let me just cut this short, since if I could, I open up the discussion on this particular item, and I appreciate my colleague weighing in, because I think we're on the same page, and you've probably brought some clarity to it, Mr. Cedillo. Thanks for bringing up the cost. First of all, I'm always 100% for cost recovery. This is expensive, and having said that, I'm also for balance. And so while we shouldn't do it on the taxpayer's back, and that's what cost recovery is about, one violation is very expensive. Even if you want to try to go through that process, it's punitive. And rightfully so, the cost is the cost. That's cost recovery just means that's what it's costing the city to process. And that's why I would go back to then, I was almost ready to put this to bed until you brought up the cost. 2 violations under this rather than the 1, because I think it's incredibly difficult to draw a nexus to the actual activity, as was stated. And 2 seems reasonable rather than having the folks go through that type of cost and time, and city time, quite frankly. While it's cost recovery, it's a lot of staff time. If it's $6,000, that's telling me right now it's a lot of staff time, and we don't have the staff. And so I would give folks it's still, they'd still have to pay the fines, they'd still have to comply with the notices to correct, they'd still have to go through and pay violations, and because it's impossible to almost come up with a list, except for perhaps party house. I think that's a no-brainer. That should be 1. And that's really the heart of where most people have an issue. And I would say 1, and you've got to pay that cost and go through it. Anything outside of a party house violation, I would suggest it be 2. And I think that's just much more reasonable. And that's, just looking for a balance. But that would be my suggestion, and we can move on.
On this question of nexus, Mr. Brothers, I actually have a question because during my time on City Council, which is very short, but the city, on a number of issues separate and apart from land use, has been called into question by the courts on nexus between what our penalty is in relation to the cost to the city of that activity. So this happened both on the ordinance we had around foreclosed housing and the fines that we were asking banks to pay. We had to go back and change that, and ended up settling for pennies on the dollars. This also happened with parking tickets. So the parking tickets double in 2 weeks. Someone went to court and said there's no relationship between this doubling and what damage I do to the city by being parked in a place I'm not supposed to be parked. It seems to me, and I want your legal opinion as best you can give it, that we'd be in the same position regarding this penalty if we can't show that it in fact costs $5,000 and that we need that having a hedge that is too tall is related to home sharing. Then my suspicion is that the courts have a history of throwing our stuff out anyway. I can't imagine that they wouldn't throw this out, and that would be the remedy that would be available to everyone if the city were to abuse this policy.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, I have several points to make because that touches on a lot of issues. I wouldn't necessarily say that any of this works a penalty, so I wouldn't categorize it as that. Although I would say if we could be more specific about the types of violations we want to see revocations and suspensions for, that would be a good thing. And right now,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So you think it's both possible and worth it to get a narrow category?
If legally speaking, yes, and obviously from a policy point of view, if the council is interested in having more of a connection between the actual citations, and either suspensions, revocation, or eligibility for this, then by all means.
I mean,
Mr. Director.
I appreciate the concern about the cost. A few things to keep in mind. We originally had in our early reports that if you wanted to do a discretionary process, that we actually do a fee study and come up with a fee that was sized to the actual cost of providing this particular service. The council chose not to go down that direction and to look at an existing fee within our existing fee structures, because the council didn't want to go through the time of doing the fee study. We're happy to go back and do the fee study if the concern is now back to the $5,600.
How much is the fee study going to cost? I'm just kidding.
We don't have to. We could do the fee study in-house.
Right.
So it's just a matter of the cost for the service. Now, so this isn't a penalty. This is a fee for the cost for the service. We originally were going to do a fee to calibrate it just to this. The council asked us not to look at an existing fee. We did. This was the closest one to get there. Now, if the concern is still that cost, there's really two ways to look at it. Understanding if you don't go down a fee study, we're just talking about subsidizing out of the general fund, but there's really two ways. One of them is to do a targeted fee study for this, or the other is to go, as Councilmember Englander was, I think, suggesting, is to raise the bar on what it takes to have this go into a discretionary process, so that we think it's much more unlikely that the applicants will have to go to the discretionary process, and they could do the more simplified administrative clearance, which is at our Development Services Center. We call it across the counter. It's not technically across the counter because we have to provide a follow-up letter, but at least it's something that's a very simple process with a much less fee. I think it's the $850 fee, the $850
Yeah,
fee.
and so in that direction, and I know there was a number of reasons of not doing the fee study, and this is probably the closest, and where we would end up at the end of the day is probably very close to this anyway. I would suggest, after hearing from the director, there's two places. One, it was under one citation, that they can no longer go through the administrative clearance, but rather the discretionary process. Let's just simplify it. My suggestion would be to make that two, period. It just makes it simple and very clear and understanding. And also takes out the possible litigation of discrimination based on the type of violation, right? Rather than coming up with a list of types of violations that we can say were discriminatory. It's just, you have one, and now that number is two. And if you go beyond that and you want to go through a discretionary process rather than the administrative clearance, it's going to cost you $6,000.
Let me just press. I wholeheartedly agree with and appreciate the spirit of your approach to this problem, because I think it's a serious problem and flaw in what we have in front of us. But say I get 2 violations for hedges, like it's still.
Well, okay, 2 things. Let me just point that out. Chance.
The north lawn and the south lawn.
Appreciate the hypothetical. A hedge violation isn't by an ACE administrator or a police officer. It's going to be by building and safety. If they come out and cite you for that with a notice to comply or a correction, they're going to hit you for it all. It's not going to be 2 different violations, from my experience in the 15 years that I've seen those kind of violations. There's a good chance that also when they come out, if you are called on for a violation like that, they're going to write you up with a notice to comply for perhaps multiple things, but it'll be one order, correct? So with that, the chances of getting 2, it's pretty rare on a single-family property. It really doesn't happen unless you're just egregious, and that's why I think it's reasonable. There is a conflict, though, because further on, under item I, page 6, there's a revocation under 2 citations. And so we would have to bump that number to 3. Because if we're going to have 1 citation jumping up to 2 citations, that's number 4I, and then, yeah, and then it goes to 2 citations under, I think it's under II. That should be 3, just because it doesn't balance if it's 2 and 2 for a revocation. Does that make sense? So, colleagues, I would suggest that just in the order of simplification and trying to just move this along and make it reasonable at the same time.
My only addition to this is that I think one, that we want to favor administrative results, right? So we want to favor the administrative process so that the inquiry to get the exemption is rare. And so I think that's in part why there is a desire to have a focus or a nexus on the laments that are brought. And then 2 is that we should favor the administrative way, so that this way it's rare that somebody's asking for that extension, that they should be able to do that administratively at the more reasoned cost.
All right. Other questions, comments, issues? With this,
I do have one quick one. Hopefully it's quick. I thought the last one was going to be quick.
By all means.
You know, I'm not here that much longer. I'm just trying
to get it in.
Trying to earn my keep.
You're counting the words now.
This is only one more plum committee for Mr.
I got years to pack in this little meeting.
Go ahead.
Make it count.
When does this? Let's assume we move this on with these changes out of this committee and just trying to figure out the process. When does this then take effect? Because this isn't dealing with, also we've got still a number of other issues behind this, and I'm not sure if they're all coming together. I'm not sure if we're gonna try to aim to have them all take effect at the same time. What kind of space are we looking at in time?
Well, we have a week between today and the expectation that we'll hear this in council. Is that right, Mr. Mejia?
Yes, next Tuesday.
All right. So there will be opportunity for discussion and amendments at council. Should we decide?
What I meant was when would the ordinance take effect?
July 1st, 2019.
July 1st. And then what? Because we're still not going through vacation rentals in this yet.
No, that's separate and distinct, the vacation rentals.
Well, it's separate and distinct because we made it that way, but it's all the same space. Okay, I'll come back to that later. Try to figure it out. Thanks.
Well, I don't know that there's going to be a later, so
later in this meeting.
I don't know that there's going to be a later.
Move it on now.
Let's do it.
Okay, so my concern is we keep pushing off that conversation, and I don't know if there's I think there is. There's an option to look at, because I know I'm thinking of another ordinance we did this too, where we bifurcated an issue internally on the ordinance to deal with later, but we made the ordinance take effect when we dealt with the other issue. Let me just bring it back to this one. That this would take effect either then when the vacation ordinance is complete, or what'd you say, July 1st, 2019?
I don't know, Councilman, and I think the best to ask the planning department as far as the timeline for the vacation ordinance, because that will require its own CEQA analysis. So
where are we with that? Because this is, if we can ask the director, where are we with the vacation elements on this?
Kevin Keller, Executive Officer, City Planning. My understanding is our staff has been going to the Housing Committee and the Vacation Ordinance. We've done some report backs, but that is still to be referred to the Planning Department to begin its outreach and CEQA analysis.
So what's the timeline? What do we think, Kevin?
Once the department receives the direction to proceed with the public outreach and CEQA timeline, the public outreach, we can usually have a hearing, have some workshops, have moving forward about that. The CEQA analysis we have not completed, so depending on what type of CEQA analysis is required, we'll have to come back with that component of the timeline.
What's the time range?
It has to be referred to us, I believe is what Mr. Keller was telling you. It hasn't been referred to us out of
That
housing.
makes sense, yeah.
So once it's referred to us, then we'll go down.
But
we're waiting.
Let's imagine it's referred to you next week. Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 2 years?
Why don't we let the city attorney, just in general, we'd have to come back with that timeline.
Okay, and because we also have one other element that was always on the table that we never fully closed out on also, which was, I brought it up in the very first meeting that we had, which is the idea of a daily fee. And we've never concluded where we were on that. Not to the owners.
Well,
and that just another element that there seems to be some outstanding issues. I want to make two suggestions. I'm actually going to put two motions out there, since it looks like we're moving on this. One, that under page 6, 4I, that changed from 1 citation to 2, based on those discussions. And then under 4, what is it, B1, that changed from 2 to 3. So in other words, 3 strikes and you're out. You're revoked. Make it very simple. So that would be my first motion.
I'll second
Okay.
the first amendment.
My second is that the implementation date of this ordinance begin on either July 1st, 2019, or upon completion of the vacation ordinance, whichever is later. And I know there's a lot of direction that has to be given to get that process finalized, but I think we need to light a fire under the process to get it moving faster. So that would be my second motion.
Ms. Kaufman, I believe you have comments in this regard.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. Just that to table any voting on that too. Those are the issues that you're going to raise, and then take your public comment, and then allow the public to comment on all of this, and then you'll come back and you'll...
Right. Oh, I'm not suggesting we vote on it right now. I'm just putting the motions out there so we can get the public comment. Yes. Thank you, Terry. Exactly.
All right, Mr. Cedillo. All right, so we'll begin public comment. We have 46 speakers on the queue. That's a lot. If you feel like what you were going to say has already been said, please feel free to forego it. I'll call you 3 at a time. We ask you to line up and come for your 1 minute of public comment. Cynthia Strathman, Trinidad Ruiz, David Ewing, Susan Hunter, Steve Diaz.
Hi, My name's Cynthia Strathman. I'm with Strategic Actions for a Just Economy. We're a nonprofit in South Los Angeles that focuses on healthy housing, tenant rights, and equitable development. First, I'd like everybody who's here to support the regulation of the short-term rental industry. Please stand up. And I really appreciate all of you here for being here to show the support from the hotel workers. We're also supported by over 17 different tenant rights organizations from all over the city who have seen firsthand how short-term rentals have helped decimate, the commercial operators in short-term rentals have helped decimate our housing market. We're in the middle of a pronounced housing crisis. We cannot afford to wait until sometime in the indeterminate future to pass legislation that will put literally thousands of housing units back onto the market at a time when people are living literally in the streets. It's unconscionable delay. And we really, really hope that you will find your moral compass to help the most vulnerable residents in this city by implementing this important regulation.
Thank you.
Hello, council members. My name is Trinidad Ruiz, and I am here representing Power, People Organized for West Side Renewal, as well as Ground Game LA. We are strongly in favor of keeping the prohibition of RSO units in the home sharing ordinance. RSO units are affordable housing for tens of thousands of Angelenos. Without this protection in the HSO, we will continue to see landlords, both large and small, convert their apartment buildings into de facto hotels. The Ellison in Venice, I'm sure you've heard of it, is one such building, zoned as residential and constructed just after 1910. The owner harassed and evicted 85% of the long-term tenants and converted 51 of the 60 units into short-term hotels, short-term rentals. As one tenant described it, we used to have tenants for 20 years, now we have them for 20 hours. We urge this committee to do the right thing and vote to pass the home sharing ordinance with the RSO protection, prohibition.
Thank you.
Susan Hunter, Los Angeles Tenants Union, Hollywood local caseworker. I'm actually receiving text messages from tenants that I work with right now because their windows have been bolted shut. Because the property owner wants them to leave so that the property owner can continue to utilize the rest of the building for short-term rentals. We needed this ordinance to pass a year ago. We can't continue to drag this out because we're concerned that it might negatively impact people. Why don't we pass it and then see who it is negatively impacting, so then that way we can start protecting the people it was meant to protect and do it as soon as possible. This is ridiculous that I continue to have to sit here and argue on behalf of these tenants when we're waiting for this ordinance to happen because we can't get HSID and building and safety involved because they're saying they're waiting for this ordinance to happen. So for the love of God, please do the right thing. Let's start doing something about these bad operators and pass this today. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is David Ewing. Mr. Choi of Airbnb says a ban on all RSO units makes second-class citizens who can't participate in the sharing economy. The truth is that opening RSO units to short-term rentals is a Trojan horse because, as Mr. Bloomfield noted, there's so many opportunities for fraud and a loss of housing. That's certainly been our experience in Venice, and we're not talking mom and pop here. Some of the worst abusers have been the leaders of our Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Choi also thinks ADUs should be opened up to short-term rentals, but as Mr. Blumenfield noted, the state legalized ADUs specifically to expand the housing supply in a housing crisis. Mr. Choi wants to make sure fees are low, but please don't embark on this program with Grover Norquist as your guide. Don't drown the program in the bathtub. Without robust fees, costs will either be passed on to the taxpayers or we'll get poor administration.
That's your time. We've been joined by our colleague, Mr. Paul Koretz. We're going to call him to the podium for public comment. Big round of applause for Mr. Koretz. It's hard enough to make it to your own committees, much less other committees, so we appreciate his diligence and passion in this regard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity to testify today. You have a chance to move forward today so that we can deal with it in full council on December 11th, and it's important that you do so. I strongly support the effort that you made in November to restore the RSO prohibition the council had previously approved. I
note that the draft ordinance prepared by the city attorney includes that prohibition. Now, I certainly understand that RSO tenants might have an equity argument, but at this point, that should be a matter for discussion at another time once we have a better handle on enforcement and perhaps can develop a methodology for differentiating between hosted and non-hosted short-term rentals. I also believe that the Planning Commission ignored one of the most sensitive issues connected with home sharing by essentially blowing the cap sky high. In November, you restored that by reinstating the 120-day cap we approved in council back in May, and I appreciate that. You may recall that I favor and have proposed a more restrictive cap and would certainly still prefer that. Washington, D.C. has implemented a 90-day cap. Other cities have as well. I think the primary reason for that is that's the point where it becomes profitable to purchase a unit and rent it full-time as an Airbnb. So the higher you go, the more likely that people try to sneak in ownership of unit or multiple units by a corporation rather than just being something that someone does that actually owns their property and lives in it. Finally, I note that the draft ordinance allows home sharing and accessory dwelling units only if they're the owner's primary residence, and that would be great, without the 2017 demarcation. I believe that using older ADUs willy-nilly for short-term rentals is not acceptable, and that it takes housing off the market and it brings nuisances into neighborhoods just like the older buildings do. So there's no real reason to differentiate. I also note that the Planning Department's supplemental report discusses the ongoing recalcitrance and bullying tactics of certain platforms in terms of refusing to cooperate with local jurisdictions on enforcement when they don't get their way in the regulations. I think that's an attempt to blackmail the city into giving them what they want, and I would encourage you not to reward that kind of behavior. And that particularly relates to vacation rentals. I think we can deal with that at another time. We shouldn't be bullied into doing that now by a corporation that's engaging in that kind of behavior. This has been desperately necessary for several years, so please don't hold it up. Send it to Council December 11th in a form that allows it to be voted on. It's time to take action, and I thank you for doing so today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Koretz. We have Steve Diaz, Pastor Eddie Jones, Amy Schmidt, Heather Rosman.
Good afternoon to this very distinguished board. I'm Pastor Eddie Jones, president of the Los Angeles Civil Rights Association. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Elected officials, let's not postpone dates. Let's not put things off. And let's remember never to forget, God is watching us and our taxpaying dollars are at work right now. Let's vote. Let's get it done. And let's help the people. The people are so very important. They make this city what it is. So let's do it. Let's get it done. I mean, let's be fair. There's a lot of people out here. How do you guys feel? Clap your hands if you want change. If you want change, clap your hands. We want change. We want it done right now. And we want our taxpayer dollars to be in favor of the people. And it's okay to do Airbnb, but make it fair and square across the board, and let's make everybody happy. Because everybody over here, they're getting their paychecks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Amy Schmidt. Los Angeles is my hometown, and I have watched housing prices rise exponentially in the last 20 years to the point when Upon receiving my first full-time job out of college, I couldn't afford to move into an apartment without taking on another job, working 80 hours a week. I am not even close to the only one in this position, and I have the privilege and benefit of a college education. We are in a housing crisis, and I beg you to consider the thousands of people who move to Los Angeles every year in search of permanent housing and are unable to find it. I'd like to add that I have no problem with responsible short-term rentals, but I do take issues with the ones that exacerbate the housing crisis. I'd also like to speak on behalf of Rabbi Israel Baruch of Dot Torah Synagogue and Gloria Calzo of the SoCal Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who couldn't be here today but would like to express their passionate support for this measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have Richard Magram, Pei Wang, Alan Battencourt. I'm sorry, ma'am, your name?
Heather Roseman with the Hotel Association.
Okay, so we haven't called you? If I called your name, come on up to the podium.
Thank you, Rich Magram. When you have a short-term rental next door to your house where party people go outside at night and drink until the middle of the night, it is a dark, oppressive cloud over your life. Sometimes it feels like a bad medical diagnosis. Because unlike a stressful job where you can come home at night and relax and sleep, you really have no home. You have no home. Just a loud, stressful place next to a party house. Our next door neighbor lives in Europe, stays at his home here in Los Feliz for a few weeks a year and rents it out the rest of the time on vacation rental by owner. We have considered selling the home that we love because of this. Please ban these short-term rentals by owners who don't live in or care about our great city. Thank you.
Dear Council, my name is Pei Wang, and I am a adjunct instructor at Los Angeles Trade Tech College. My family and I live in an RSO duplex unit in Westchester. We live in both units and rent out part of it as an STR. On September 13th, 2018, David Ambrose of the CP stated, "I don't understand why RSO owners are being treated like second-class citizens. I'm not asking for anything special. Treat me like any other owner-occupied short-term rental. Allow me to support myself by allowing me to rent out my RSO unit as a home share. If you eliminate RSOs entirely or limit my days to 120, I'm out of business either way. I support sensible regulations that eliminate bad actors and encourage sensible, responsible homeowners. This is my home, and I just want to share part of it. My home has never been rented out and never plan on to be."
My name is Alan Battencourt. I'm from Highland Park. Due to a work accident, I lost my only means of income 3 years ago. Airbnb platform has been crucial in replacing that. It's the only income we get. It's my home, it's our residence, it's a sacrifice to rent it to strangers. You should never forget that. I have strangers in my living room, and that is a big thing. Between property taxes and the 14% TOT, I already paid $18,000 last year of taxes. And I'm registered with the city from day one before anybody ever asked me to. I'm a taxpayer, I'm a voter. You need to help us protect the homegrown business here.
Thank you.
This is...
I'm sorry, you got plenty of time. I'm sorry, that's my
I'm sorry,
mistake.
I had 16 seconds left.
You do.
Okay, so this is the difference. We're not fighting against hotels. We're different. Like, I'm selling homegrown tomatoes. They're selling packaged tomatoes. It's just, we're just the little people. Help us, please.
Hi there, Heather Roseman with the Hotel Association of Los Angeles. Welcome, Councilmember Harris Dawson, to your new position as chair. Would just like to encourage everyone to pass this ordinance as written. 120 days is a very generous amount of time. I think kicking the can down the road at this point would open up more de facto hotels and commercial operators that are taking the current housing stock off of the market. We really need to protect our affordable housing in the city of Los Angeles and not exacerbate our homelessness issues in this city. So thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Nishinsky, Mark Bachner, Josine McGee, Vanessa Johnson. Come on, Ms. John, you're a big star. You're right here at the front. Come on. Come on, let's do it. Ms. Johnson. Let's go.
I've been a host for over 8 years.
Tell us your name.
My name is Vanessa Johnson.
Thank you.
I've been a host for over 8 years, and I host in South Los Angeles. You know, hosting, we all have different incomes. What we get in South Los Angeles and what we get in West LA is different. You know, paying $850 a year to host 365 days is a big portion of my income. And it's for another host, we make different. So think about it. We are different areas. Each part of the city is not equal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Bachner. I'm here as a concerned host in an RSO property. When I left here last time, the ordinance wasn't restricting how I host. It was taking it away from me altogether. I don't host for supplemental income. I host because I need that income to stay in my home. For 20 years, I had 2 equal income streams with 2 rental units in my triplex and a physical therapy practice. My units were kept way under market, and many years I even skipped their increases. About 3 years ago, arthritis made me cut back on my second income, and now I depend on home sharing to make up that shortage in my budget, as well as give me security as I head in toward my retirement years. And yes, I am older than I look. I need the income of hosting 365 days, not 120 or 240, because my bills come 12 months a year. Shutting me down as an RSO host or limiting my days to host would be devastating. I am an owner-occupied and did not kick anybody out to host. I simply separated an extra room of my apartment. Thank you.
We have Josie McGee, Rhonda Hayter, Heather Santora. Yes, sir.
My name is Stephen Nishinsky. I'm a homeowner of 25 years in CD3. Please don't let this proposed ordinance create a new bureaucracy that will use up LA City's substantial revenues being generated by home sharing. Don't punish responsible home sharing hosts with almost $1,000 in costs for yearly hosting. And don't incite concerns from neighbors by requiring a warning, more hosting like notices be sent to them, even if there's never been a home sharing problem. And please don't discourage bookings by adding more draining fees on our guests. An invasive, expensive, and likely dissentious bureaucracy should not be needed. Bad actors will be eliminated through this ordinance normally. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rhonda Hayter, and my husband and I have owned a duplex in the Miracle Mile district for 20 years, where we've always rented out the upper unit long-term, and we live in the lower unit. When my kids started college and we began to drown financially, I started renting out one of their bedrooms on Airbnb, and it has saved us. It is keeping us in our home in this increasingly unaffordable city. People who are renting out a room in their own homes are doing it because they need to. I absolutely understand the need to protect our housing stock. I understand the need to get party houses out of residential neighborhoods. But that has nothing to do with owner-occupied home sharing. To limit people like us to 120 days will not do one thing to make more RSOs available. We are living in those units. So it's pointless, it's arbitrary, it will have cruel consequences for some of us. So I please, don't limit RSO home sharing to 120 days.
My name is Heather Santora. Thank you for allowing me to share.
I have often felt the pinch of the lack of affordable housing, and this rose to a crisis level in my family 5 years ago. Then a friend recommended I rent my one-bedroom back house as a short-term rental, and for the last 4 years, we have been affording to stay in our home because of the income that we earn from hosting 325 days or more a year. In our case, Airbnb is not taking affordable housing off the market. It has finally given us the stability that we need to stay. What started as me and my sons cleaning and greeting our guests has grown into a full business called Heather's Angels. I'm proud to say I now employ 20 employees, 16 of which are single moms like myself. If you want to know what's really happening inside these homes, I can tell you just ask the cleaners. And the idea of party houses is completely blown out of proportion. So I'm come here to ask you 4 things. A simple registration system, low registration fees in line with business licenses, an open calendar up to 365 days, and please allow the tourism dollars to come into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Joanne McAuliffe, Derek Rath, Joseph Barmettler, Leslie Hope, Linda Lewin.
Hi, I'm Joanne McAuliffe. I was going to tell you my plight, but I really think that I need to address this 120-day issue and the cost that it generates for the city to administer it. It is a totally political, arbitrary 120 days. I hope you're aware of that. And most Airbnbs are under 180 days. So many of the registrants would just drop out, and it wouldn't be $5,600 per unit to administer. I really hope you look at that. It is a political, arbitrary, totally arbitrary limit. I think you all know that, and I really want you to revisit that. Now, I do Airbnb because I have to. I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, that was me coughing.
Oh.
Getting over a cold. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and also I have an RSO. I live on the property. Please allow me to rent it 365 days. I need to. Thank you.
My name is Derek Rath. I'm a 40-year resident of Venice, quietly home sharing with no neighbor complaints for 8 of those years. I have never displaced a long-term renter. I want to save the neighborhood by enabling homeowners like me to stay in the neighborhood. Let nuisance issues be dealt with by the same means as for anyone else. Call the police, let them investigate and adjudicate any complaints. Don't hold us hostage to complaints from a neighbor having some pre-existing or unconnected grudge, such as a barking dog or my own 70th birthday. If habitable garage conversions or granny flats are to be used, does that not require a shower at least, without the need for a pool as currently written? We also need a simple registration system and a modest extension fee structure, more like $100. An online system will not cost anywhere near that to administer. This has been complicated legislation. I hope for a fair-minded and non-punitive conclusion.
Thank you.
Leslie Hope. According to a recent LA Times article, the city has given $1 billion in subsidies to hotel developers. In contrast, all Airbnb hosts strengthen and contribute to our city's bottom line by paying 14% transient occupancy tax, which many hotels are exempted from paying. Rather than giving subsidies, why not use the revenue to fund short-term rental registration and enforcement? $800 to a high of $1,600 in fees will put many hosts out of business, causing them to lose their homes, thereby destroying neighborhoods. Let's use these potential new funds to create a simple registration process, preferably online, that requires just a few boxes to check. In other cities like San Francisco and Portland that put in place cumbersome registration, it was a loss for hosts and cities, a loss for hosts because the registration process made it difficult for them to comply, and believe me, we want to comply, and a loss for the cities because of lost revenue from registration fees and TOT. Enforcement can be handled by existing city agencies. There's no need for the planning department to establish
That's your time.
elaborate and expensive bureaucracies.
Yes.
Joseph Barmettler. I'm representing the Greater Valley Glen Neighborhood Council.
And you all have a statement on record, so you will speak for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I I'm not sure I'll need that much, but
You don't have to take it.
we filed a CIS on the original ordinance, of which 4 predominant factors loomed heavy for us. I understand this is an amendment, so I'll focus only on the items that we had put in the CIS regarding this amendment. We have not had a chance to vote on this amendment as it was last night, and we had to cancel our meeting at the last minute. First of all, the Greater Valley Glen Council is opposed to disqualifying RSO units for home share rentals. We think that basically you're being very prejudiced against the lower income renters, and these are the people that actually need the opportunities. And everything I've been hearing today and through the ordinance lifespan is that you're really favoring people who are homeowners, and basically that's individuals who could afford a $700,000, $800,000 house, of which 60% of the people who rent in Los Angeles supposedly are under RSO contracts. So eliminating RSOs is not a good idea, and I think we've heard the sentiment here today of it's very obvious that to us and to many people involved that the calendar caps are not needed, and you should just eliminate them entirely. I understand that there's a lot of processes and things you want to get done, but making it lower and harder is just not the way to do it. You're alienating the lower income individuals that make up the backbone of Los Angeles. And this will be prevalent after this ordinance passes if in fact the RSO holds. A home that is a multi-million-dollar home might rent for, I don't know if you've investigated this, which I hope you have, but these homes would go anywhere between $80 or $200 a night. These RSO units, a pre-1978 apartment building as an example, a 2-bedroom apartment, they're only going to get $24, maybe $30 a night for one room. So why are we so threatened by that? I mean, the market totally regulates itself, and the more expensive homes cost more and the cheaper ones are cheaper. There's influx of many millennials entering Los Angeles looking for residences, and they're using this home share to survive, and they're paying between $800 $1,000 a month for a room, and it's working for them. It's saving them, and it's actually bringing them into our economy. Now, to alienate that is just absurd to our board and to me as an individual. The fees and the calendar restrictions proposed are disproportionate and unfair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Heidi Milo, Wilson Trong, Roland Koser.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Lewin. I am privileged to live in the 11th District. I bought my home as a single woman 32 years ago. In fact, I moved in on December 5th, 1986. My special needs daughter was placed with me as a foster child when she was 6 years old. She's now 29. She's been receiving services from Westside Regional Center for 15 years now. We cannot leave this district and lose that service. Airbnb has allowed us to stay in our home. I depend on my Social Security, my daughter's SSI disability, and Airbnb to make ends meet. The outrageous fees in the proposed ordinance will break us. Between property taxes, income taxes, health care, I already pay over $10,000 a month. I rent a spare bedroom in my home. I am not taking away housing from anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Winnie Chen, Mark Ryavec, Jeremy Jenny.
Good evening, council members. My name is Wilson Trung. I'm with the Los Angeles Vacation Home Rental Alliance. We represent thousands of homeowners, business owners, and property managers, and we want to urge the Plum Committee to make sure that we consider a primary ordinance as well as a vacation home rental ordinance as well. I'd like to read in a comment, one of our homeowners. Her name is Tamara Cawthron. I've been a property owner in Los Angeles for the last 35 years. I have a guest home, which I use for both housing relatives who visit and for short-term rentals to vacationers. I am very responsible for and always vet my renters. The next extra income from this rental allows us to continue to stay in our home because it helps with the mortgage and taxes. At 60 years old, I need every penny I can make, and making this illegal will cause severe financial hardship. Please consider very carefully the reaction of your voters and constituents before you make this possible. Thank you.
Hi, I'm speaking on behalf of Andrea Savo with the LA Vacation Home Rental Alliance. As a working actor and performer in Los Angeles, we need you to consider an entire group that should be included in the ordinance: whole home vacation rentals. I rely on the income I receive when I rent my home, especially when I am out of town on vacation or otherwise. The income I receive from renting my home provides me stability and peace of mind. Home rentals and vacation rentals in Los Angeles are an essential source
You
of
tell us your name?
Winnie, and I'm reading on behalf of Andrea Savo.
We can't do that. Sorry.
Okay.
You have to let Mr. Ryavec.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to wait until I want you to see them because it'll make a lot more sense. My name is Mark Ryavec. I've lived in Venice for 29 years. Started my career in this building, downstairs on the second floor in the office of the Chief Legislative Analyst, and at one point actually was staff to this committee. I have provided you a picture of my house in Venice that I bought 29 years ago. It was built in 1905. It's one of the first houses built in Venice. And below it, you will see what that complex looks like right now. I have owned this for 30 years, but despite that, in 1978, somehow it got stuck under rent control. Even though it is, the Building and Safety says it's 2 single-family residences. There's a 1-bedroom unit in the back, a 4-bedroom house in the front. I am here today to ask you if you would please provide an escape hatch for
That's your time.
For houses under rent control
That's your time.
that are over a certain rent per night. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Jeremy Jenny. I'm a 4th-generation Los Angelino. I rent a second home for short-term rentals. As a host, I'm proud to share my neighborhood with traveling families. This income from my rental is essential for my family. And my family has owned this building for 70 years. Please don't, please include traditional vacation home rentals into your ordinance. I support reasonable regulations. The current ordinance on short-term rentals doesn't include anything for whole home, and I'm just asking that, as Councilman Englander mentioned earlier, that it's an important thing to include at the present time. Thank you.
Heidi Milo, Jelena Spajic, Trinidad Ruiz. You already spoke. Greg Spiegel.
My name is Yelena, and I'm here representing Stay a While Villas, a professional and responsible vacation rental company in Los Angeles. This year alone, we've paid out over $500,000 in TOT taxes. We list 35 single-family second homes. I'm proud of the fact that I employ over 40 housekeepers, that I pay better than the hotels do. I'm proud of the experiences we are able to offer our guests while they stay with us. I'm proud of the income we're able to generate for owners. And more recently, I'm proud of the fact that we've been able to house Malibu families who are evacuees who otherwise would have nowhere else to go. I'm asking that you consider whole home vacation rentals as a part of the ordinance and not an all-out ban. This would be a devastation to my business, to my family, and to everyone who works for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra Rodriguez, Luis Preciado, Charlie Carnell, Lucy Hahn, and Pierre E. Yes.
Hello, my name is Sandra Rodriguez and I live here in LA. As many of you know, it is very difficult to find something affordable here. Most of the people that work here and would like to live here as well, but they've been pushed out to neighboring cities and they have to drive 1 or 2 hours to get to work. We need an ordinance now. Most of us cannot afford to wait. Most of us are living paycheck to paycheck and we would like to live in the same city that we work in. So please, we need that ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Luis Preciado. I'm a renter and a member of Unite Here Local 11. We've been waiting for a long time for this ordinance while people's rent is going up and they are getting kicked out of their homes. Please don't delay this anymore. Let's pass this as is, and we can't afford to wait. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Charlie Carno. I'm a research analyst for Unite Here Local 11. We're here in strong support of this ordinance and support the inclusion of rent-controlled properties to make sure that they cannot be used for short-term rentals. I live in a rent-controlled unit, and I know that on my block, other rent-controlled units are being used for short-term rentals. They need to be for long-term housing. We also encourage this ordinance to take effect in July, not subject to an undetermined amount of time that we would have to wait for a vacation rentals ordinance. We've lost thousands of units to short-term rentals just in the period that we've been discussing this. It's great that we've been thorough and the time to act is now. So we encourage that this ordinance be passed and it take effect in July as was initially proposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Pierre El Figoli. I own a duplex in West Los Angeles. I live in one unit with my family and my disabled mother-in-law. The second unit was put on the market for a lease for 6 months, and I was not able to rent it. I was about to lose my property until I discovered vacation home rental and short-term rental. That saved me from losing my property. My mortgage and my property tax is almost $6,000 a month. There is no way I can survive on my income. Please, short-term rental. Without short-term rental, I will definitely lose my property and I will be homeless with my family. Please consider it.
Thank you. Chris Ganser, Lucy Hahn, Anthea Raymond. I believe that concludes our speaker list.
Hello, my name is Chris Ganser. I've owned my home for 18 years. I live in a duplex. It's in Silver Lake. The building was built in 1918, so the first floor was originally called a servant's quarters. Renting the unit on the first floor, as well as the other bedrooms in my house, is my only source of income and the only reason I'm able to not only keep my home, but also better maintain it as well as pay down my mortgage. Any cap will be the end of that income. And I'll have to move to like Phoenix or Palm Springs. I want to stay in LA, okay? Let me remind anybody that we're also the people. We are the community, okay? It's not just the red shirts. And if I have to move to Phoenix, then the rich people who move into my house, they'll just be there a few times a year if they're out shooting their movies in Morocco or Vancouver, or it'll be, you know, somebody will tear it down, build luxury condos. Either way, nobody in a red shirt will be able to live in that house, okay? And if the hotel industry, like the lady said, is so concerned about the housing crisis, why don't they cap how many rents, you know, how many days they put on their hotels? Or better yet, pay their staff a living wage. So these people in the red shirts can afford to live in Los Angeles. Thank you, hotels. And I'm so happy that you guys can recognize this. Thank you, Mr. Didu, Mr. England, Mr. Davis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lucy Hahn. I'm with community organization Friends of the Jungle, located in Playa del Rey. I'm a 15-year resident in Los Angeles. STRs must not be allowed in RSO units. My neighbors have been evicted, and they live in RSOs. And the owners turn around and they rent our STRs after they leave. By then, the tenants have left and will not fight the landlord as lawyer fees are too high. Most of the buildings in my neighborhood are RSOs. Our neighborhood is like a family. STRs and RSO units ruin our sense of community. I own RSO units in LA, and I'm still against STRs and RSOs as it ruins the community where I live. I am also against STR and RSOs. It is not fair to the landlords when the tenants have suppressed rents and rent their RSOs only to make more than what they rent it for. The fines are not large enough to deter SDRs and RSOs. My neighbor on the beach makes $600 a night from RSOs. A few days of fines will not prevent them from renting our STRs. Please raise the fines. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Vargas. I am a homeowner, and a year ago I lost my employment. I would like to request the council member to please continue being as thorough and thoughtful in your questioning of this amendment, because as it is right now, I don't think that it is taking in consideration the small people like me. I feel like we're getting squeezed between corporations, people who get paid to appear in here, and people like me who are taking time away from home to try to have my voice heard. I urge you to please differentiate between large corporations, small operators, make the registration a very simple process, and have the fees be as little as possible. I cannot afford to pay $800 when I am depending on my side unit to bring the income. When my unit is occupied, I go and sleep with my boyfriend. I need to make sure that I don't have any complaints with my boyfriend. Otherwise, I'm going to go homeless and in food
Thank
stamps.
you.
I don't want to
Thank
be a
you.
public charge. Just
I
please keep that
appreciate
in
you.
mind. Thank you so much.
I was initially supposed to be under this. Is it okay?
Oh, from the last two. Yes. I'm sorry. Come on up.
No, absolutely. And this lady is.
Yes, I remember.
My name is Chanel Blake. I have a fourplex I host in Leimert Park. I've had that building for nearly 20 years, and I've had the pleasure of providing housing for many Angelenos, including those who are HIV positive, people coming from hotels, the homeless, physically, mentally challenged, foster parents, and many, many others. I think that short-term rentals are not the problem. The short-term rentals did not create the housing crisis. And if the city of Los Angeles got rid of all short-term rentals, we would still have the housing crisis. So I don't want us to think that this is somehow the problem that created the housing issue. I also want to say that rent stabilization ordinance does not equate to fair housing or affordable housing. That's not what that ordinance does. And also, by having the rent stabilization ordinance issue here, it doesn't guarantee that houses automatically go back to the housing stock. There are many things that I could choose to do with my place. It's not permanent housing or short-term rentals. There's other things I could do with it, so it doesn't guarantee that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marnie Lustig. I'm so grateful for this committee. LA has traditionally been a vacation destination, and furnished short-term rental homes have been in their entirety, not just shared homes, have been in existence for the last 40 years, exist throughout the rest of the world, and I really appreciate that we can reason things out so that it allows for change in our city and everybody can win and we can create a win-win. I work directly with an owner at a home in Pico Union. I offer an experience that allows large groups to travel to LA for work and important business, large film crews, event coordinators, builders, large families. The house serves a need in LA that is not currently being met by hotels. They can wake up together and connect when they're building a restaurant like Momofuku did this year from New York to Los Angeles. There are times when there's a tremendous need to stay together and work together. They need to have laundry facilities and kitchens and privacy. Los Angeles hotels unfortunately can't provide that. On that note, this home does not just have an owner securing the aspects of home that keep them safe. There are two people taking care, me and the owner. So the secure and the safety is doubled up. It's not less than or irresponsible. Thank you so much.
All right, we have from District, tell me your name.
I'm Anthea Raymond. I was on the list. I own a 1908 duplex in Cypress Park. I bought it in 2014 empty, and I put a unit of affordable housing on the market at that time that now houses a city employee and his 3 family members. I live in the bottom unit of my 1908 duplex. I have a back room that I rent out to people from around the world. Nearing my 60th birthday, I make about $12,000 or $14,000 extra renting out this back room. My concern is the confusion that still lingers around our definition of the RSO in the code. My suggestion, because I know I don't have a lot of time, is we include this language in the code to address the situation of people like me who live in our homes and provide affordable housing because we live in our homes. And this is the language I would suggest. The exclusion of RSO units does not include those operating under a T1 or T3 exemption under the rent stabilization ordinance where the unit is the primary residence of the property owner.
Thank you. We have from District 11, Ms. Klein.
Thank you so much. Krista Klein, Planning Director for Council District 11. I'm here on behalf of the council member today to voice our strong opposition to tying the effective date of this ordinance or this ordinance altogether to that of the vacation rental ordinance. The bulk of the impact of the vacation rentals is likely going to be in the coastal area of Los Angeles. Our concern is the loss of even more rental housing. The underlying premise of this ordinance is to limit to primary residences. The tying to the vacation rental ordinance changes that whole aspect of enforcement of this ordinance itself. We ask that you move this ordinance along today, not tying it to the vacation rental ordinance, the effective dates. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you who came. It was nice to get a broad view of our great city and people from all over it. Mr. Mejia, we have a number of items that need to be read into the record, so I will ask you to start that process now.
Okay. So recommendation 1, Councilman, it's to approve the city attorney prepare ordinance for home sharing and the negative declaration and the related CEQA findings. This ordinance shall take effect on July 1st, 2019, or upon the effective date of an ordinance authorizing and regulating short-term rentals in non-primary residence, with the goal of such an ordinance being approved by July 1st, 2019. Number 2, remove the language in Chapter 170 of the Municipal Code, Section 1222, otherwise denoted as the Short-Term Rental Enforcement Trust Fund, and request the city attorney to draft a new ordinance consistent with this language, and request the council president to refer this to the Budget and Finance Committee. Number 3, request the city attorney to review as to form and legality the amendments to the following sections in Municipal Code Section 1222. Section F, hosting platform responsibilities. Add new Section 6, whenever a hosting platform complies with administrative guidelines issued by the Planning Department to confirm that a listing has a home sharing registration, and 2, or B, enters into a platform agreement with the city to establish how the hosting platform will support the city's enforcement efforts, and the hosting platform shall be deemed to have complied with the platform responsibilities in this subsection, otherwise denoted as 1222A 31F. Platform agreement must be approved by the City Council. Section H, extended home sharing, subsection 4, revocations. Amend the revocation to occur after 2 citations. Number 4, refer the Planning Department's recommendations as noted in their November 28, 2018 report relative to the implementation and enforcement of the proposed home sharing ordinance as follows to the Budget and Finance Committee for further review, and in addition request the CAO to prepare a report within 30 days as to any budgetary, fiscal impacts, or corrections needed, as stated below. Instruct the Planning Department to enter into a contract with host compliance for monitoring and verification services as outlined under Attachment A of the Planning Department report, and make a finding that the services provided by host compliance are of an expert and technical nature, and therefore competitive bidding under Charter Section 371 is neither practical or advantageous. Further instruction in that report, Planning Department report, to transfer, subject to the approval of the mayor, $1,464,825 from the UB, the unappropriated balance, fund number 100-58, to the Department of City Planning's fund number 100-68, account number 3040, contractual services, for the services described above. Further instruction for the CAO to review, refer the request for resolution authorities for the following 26 positions that's denoted in the report, planning positions, and transfer of the appropriate funds from the UB, the unappropriated balance, fund number 100-58, for the home sharing program implementation, enforcement, and administration to Budget and Finance and Personnel and Welfare Committee. Number 5, instruct the Department of City Planning to work with the CAO to identify alternative funds to subsidize the full staffing costs associated with the registration and renewal of the proposed application fees as listed in the proposed home sharing ordinance. Finally, 6, request the Office of the CAO to work with the General Services Department and the Department of City Planning to evaluate options to identify and provide to the Department of City Planning additional spaces at Fig Plaza or City Hall to accommodate additional staff. That concludes the instructions.
Thank you so much. Ms. Brothers, you seem pensive.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, I did have a question, and maybe you'll address this as you talk amongst yourselves and deliberate. But part of the proposed amendment includes adding a section to the hosting platform responsibilities, which says whenever a hosting platform complies with administrative guidelines issued by the Planning Department to confirm that a listing has a home sharing registration, the hosting platform shall be deemed to have complied with the platform responsibilities. And I'm wondering, since of course we need to, if this is what the committee is going to recommend, how will the city know if a hosting platform is complying with the administrative guidelines? What type of evidence or sign or requirement would we have?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm hoping staff can shed some light on that matter.
Arthi Varma with the Department of City Planning. Throughout the ordinance, there is language that describes the promulgation of administrative guidelines to be created by the Director of Planning to lay out the procedures for how a host would apply online, get their registration number, and post. So those administrative guidelines have not yet been drafted. They can be drafted to specify ways in which the hosting platform would be required to comply, but those guidelines are yet to be written.
So when we come back with those guidelines will come back to this committee before they go live?
They're administrative guidelines, so the intent is that they would be done administratively.
So I guess the way we can remedy this is that we'll ask that those guidelines come back to us, and then we can deal with this question of how we know. There we go. Mr. England. All right.
Councilman, there's
Yes.
a further instruction that I have to read into the record.
You have more.
Yes. A separate instruction to instruct the city clerk to send a letter on behalf of Plum to the Department of City Planning to develop recommendations for the Planning Commission, consideration and undertake a new CEQA analysis that would regulate short-term rentals in non-primary residences and provide future amendments to allow home sharing in owner-occupied residences smaller than 4 units subject to the RSO.
Is that yours? Any more? All right, Mr. Cedillo? Pardon me? Yes, with regard to owner-occupied RSOs units.
No, I noted that this is going to budget, and I think it's important for us that people here feel confident that the price of the fees are, for the cost recovery and for whatever's necessary. But there is one small tweak that I'd like to suggest here that goes to budget, and it's this question of when there's a circumstance. So, for example, I've heard recently we dealt with seniors in Chinatown, and I was impressed at how they live on these fixed incomes and that there are really no margins for them. Or in the past, I've seen situations with people who are home caring for their disabled members of their family, and really require austere and disciplined budgeting. I think there are some circumstances like that, whether it's a child who's, under the Lanterman Act, or whether it's somebody who's I remember previously when I was in planning that there, in this committee, that there was instances where somebody was completely disabled and their family was taking care of them. I think that these types of extraordinary circumstances, the city should be sensitive to and look at maybe exempting them from these fees. And so whether there's a broad catch-all, equity, justice, extraordinary circumstance type of exemption that the Budget Committee can look at.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. So, Mr. Mejia, have we read into the record everything that we are considering at this moment?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make the report back on the administrative guidelines a separate motion.
Yes.
And we'll just vote on the rest.
Yes. And Councilman, the
Yes, sir.
changes, sorry to interrupt you, sir, but the changes requested of City Attorney, my understanding is the ordinance is scheduled before council on Tuesday.
Yes.
So if you could please make the request of City Attorney to submit it to the clerk, whatever revisions need to be made to the ordinance by Friday.
I am making such a request.
Thank you.
We're good?
We're good, sir.
All right. So I'll move that we adopt the recommendations that have been read into the record. Looking for a second. Seconded by Mr. Englander. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order.
And City Attorney is reminding me to also insert the typographical, or however we want to define, changes that City Attorney made.
Yes.
In addition.
The technical corrections.
Yes, technical corrections.
Technical corrections offered by City Attorney Brothers. We'll adopt those as well. And then I'll put forward a motion that the administrative guidelines come back to the Plum Committee for review upon their completion. Can we get those in 30 days? No. 60?
This is Kevin Keller, Executive Officer, City Planning. I think we can bring you an update 60 days before any program goes into implementation, so we can have those to you well before they go into effect.
Okay, 60 days before implementation, we'll get those administrative guidelines back. So that'll be the motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Englander. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order.
Then the other two motions that were outstanding was one on the citations from one citation to two in this section that we covered, and then in the subsequent section, the following section was two citations to three.
Seconded. Seconded by Mr. Cedillo, offered by Mr. Englander. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order.
And then my final one was the effective date to be married to VR as well, or July 1, whichever is later. That'll also give us time for the administrative guidelines as well.
Do we have a second?
So, just to be clear, Councilman Englander, your amendment was to the section on revocations 4B1I, I believe, and you wanted to denote that as one citation rather than two.
No, I'm sorry. It's going from one citation, as it's currently proposed,
Yes.
to two citations.
To two citations.
And then in the following section,
Yes.
I believe it was 4B2,
Yes.
if I recall. And then that would be from two
Two to
citations
three.
to three.
You said three strikes are out.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Do we need to vote again, or is that sufficient? Is that clarification sufficient? Yes?
Yeah.
All right. And so we have a motion and a second from Mr. Cedillo regarding tying the dates of implementation from to either July 1st or the time that the vacation rental ordinance is enacted. So that's been moved and seconded. There's no objection, so that'll be the order.
Okay.
Excellent. Where does that leave us with regard to business for today's Planning Land Use Management Committee meeting?
General public comment, Councilman? Is there any?
Gone on when I got here.
Yeah, we were
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I think with all due respect, I think when I came in, you were in general public comment. I want to apologize to those. I was in another committee, and it was difficult. We were dealing with a comparably
No, we haven't done it.
controversial issue, so I had to come in late, and But I believe you were in public comment at that
I
time.
believe we were doing comment, Councilman.
Yeah,
Cedillo,
we were doing
on
number
item
5, Mr. Cedillo, actually, so.
Did I stand corrected?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have 4 people that we're very excited to hear from on general public comment. Any issue that is pertinent to this committee. We have Alan Battencourt, Lydia Lee, Rika Feliciano, and Melanie Toe. If you can approach the mic, if we do not see you, we will adjourn this meeting. There she is. Let's give our speaker some respect. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Hello?
Yes.
Testing. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Lydia Lee, and I'm a member of the Coalition to Prevent Alcohol-Related Harms in Los Angeles Metro. I'm here today to ask the committee to put the alcohol-restricted use sub-district motion, Council File 17-0117, on the plum agenda. This proposed ordinance, modeled after San Francisco's, gives communities local control on alcohol proliferation. Communities and you, as council member, will have the opportunity to identify what types of businesses, including what alcohol license type, are allowed in a sub-area of the community. The motion asks for a feasibility report. Please consider putting the motion on the plum agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rika Feliciano. I'm a member of the Coalition to Prevent Alcohol-Related Harms in LA Metro, also known as COPAM. I'm here today to ask the committee to put the alcohol restricted use sub-district motion, also known as ARIS, Council File 17-0117 on the plum agenda. This is a community tool that will allow for us to address the undue concentration of alcohol outlets in our city. We have the support of ARIS from many neighborhood councils and organizations, including Community Coalition, Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council, North Hollywood West Neighborhood Council, Pacoima Neighborhood Council, Children's Hospital LA, Prevention Institute, Watts Healthcare, and more. Please consider putting the motion on the plum agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Melanie Toe. I'm also part of, COPAM. And again, like the other ladies, I'm here to ask the Plum Committee to agendize the Council File 17-0117, the Alcohol Restricted Use Sub-District Motion. This is a community tool, good for the communities and business. It will allow the community members as well as yourselves to decide what types of businesses go into our communities. And this is a tool that will help mitigate alcohol densities in our communities. Right now, we have an undue concentration of alcohol outlets. And right now, in Council District 8, we have 185 alcohol licenses and applications, 403 in Council District 12, 437 in Council District 1, 333 in Council District 9, and 484 in Council District 3. And alcohol does not have to be the only thing that helps businesses survive. And I think we must do better as a community and as a city to better our businesses and the public health and safety of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready for adjourning?
Yes, sir.
We're adjourned. Thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful day.